in schools. How would you, what exactly is the thinking? I don't know if you can let us know if this has been a worry for government, especially at the federal level, spending so much on basic education, and how they think we can get around this. Professor Ihonvbere, if you can, please kindly intervene on the matter. What's the thinking in government? Have you had a discussion with, say, the executive arm of government on this matter? What is happening in that area?
Thank you. Yes, we've had several engagements with the Federal Ministry of Education, with the Minister of State particularly, and the Permanent Secretary, on what are the best approaches to do things differently. And I think that is where the challenge is. Our leaders, governors particularly, school managers, have not yet recognized the need to embrace a new approach to securing our schools, securing our children, and doing things differently. We still continue in the old way. Nigeria signed the Safe Schools initiative in 2019, and in October this year, Nigeria will be hosting the 4th international meeting on the Safe School initiative, endorsed by 109 nations. But on ground, in terms of practice, we're not yet on that line. So there is a lot of talk. There are meetings, there are policy papers and documents, but the implementation is where we still have a lot of problem. And I think government needs to change its approach in terms of what do we do that should be different? How do we bring in new technology? How do we get community buy-in into the schools? How do we even redesign our schools in order to ensure and assure some level of security? How do we network our schools with security agencies so that intervention will be swift and quick whenever there are problems? These are not yet been done. Have we mapped out the hotspots? How do we merge schools to ensure that we protect children that are in schools that are easily accessible to bandits and kidnappers? So these are some of the issues that we keep talking about, but I think the issue is the challenge. Resources are provided by UBEC to schools, by the federal ministry to schools. I also think that there is a problem with deployment of resources received in matching grants. You still find schools without perimeter fencing at all. So these children are just exposed. You have many schools with perimeter fencing, but no gates, no security arrangements at all at the entrance. So people walk in. I've been to schools on oversight, and I see market women, hawkers, people selling all kinds of wares, drinks, drugs, walking into the school premises. Schools without water, schools without toilets, schools without playground for children in basic education. So there are challenges. But these are not insurmountable challenges. And I think until we decide as a nation to take these issues head on, deploy resources, monitor the deployment of resources. Some states receive money from UBEC, running into billions, but you don't see anything on ground. And I think these are part of the issues. Doing things differently, listening, using new technology, networking the schools, retraining the managers, and really relying on communities where these schools are located.
It's very worrying when you say that, you know, there's so much talk, but very little being done. And then when you go on oversight, you don't see a lot being done. I'm just wondering, you know, because some people will say that should not be coming from government. And when you speak, I'm sure they also consider that you're a part of government, even though, yes, you're a lawmaker. But I do not know, because we know that the president was in London recently for an education summit. It was just in August he was in London. I'm wondering what exactly well, we've heard of the gains, what came out of that. But have you seen any movement? I know that the National Assembly has been on recess largely. Has there been any movement, any attempt at conversation to say this is the direction we're going come the new term? We're looking at virtual learning to see how it is that we can have students you know, learn virtually and things of the sort. I do not know if you can quickly speak to that, but I'll let you intervene when we come back from this break. Well, Prof, I don't know if you can hear me and if you still remember the question which I was asking. I am just saying that, you know, people will be wanting to look at more action and whether you've seen any movement towards action from the conversations you've been having behind the scenes, especially since the President's return from the London Education Summit.
Thank you. Yes, the President was in London and he made very good commitments to increase funding to the education sector. And like I said, we're hosting in October the Safe School Declaration Initiative where 109 countries will be gathering in Abuja. And interestingly, the theme of that new conference in October is ensuring safe education for all, from commitment to practice. And I think that is where the trick is, the practice. But until we agree as a nation to do things differently, to look at things differently, to interrogate our past errors and commit to a whole new approach to education, we will not. You see, there is a concentration in the capital cities. If you go to any state, for example, you go to the capital city, you see the schools well decorated, nice furniture, beautiful children, there is water. But step 5 minutes outside the capital city, you see decay, dislocation, and rot. Neglected children, schools with 1 or 2 teachers, children sitting on the floor, schools without toilets. And I ask the teachers, how do they toilet? They go into the bush. In 2021 Nigeria, you have a school, there are so many ways of providing perimeter fencing. There are so many ways in which you can even secure the school premises and at least network your school to security agencies. These are not things that require billions of naira to do, but we're not doing them. Why? So I believe that we don't have to wait till more children are kidnapped. We say we have 10 million children out of school. I think the actual figure is about 13 million. There is a whole new category called not in school children. These are children who were in school but have dropped out because their parents could not continue either to fund or to carry the burdens of school. So they're roaming about the streets or hawking in the motor parks. And we have governments that know that being in school is legally compulsory. So we're not behaving like people that really want to use education as a foundation to move forward. Look at a country like Taiwan. They have no mineral resources whatsoever, but they lead many nations in the world in technology because they develop education. Rwanda is networking all its schools, both for security and instruction.
So
let's take this back to Professor Ihonvbere. I mean, he's the closest to government we have on the show this morning, just before Mark comes in. I just want to still touch on the Safe School Initiative. I know you spoke about it. The Senate earlier on talked about a probe into the $20 million. And naturally, when people ask questions, they look to government. And it's interesting that you're also a bit curious as to what happened. What do you know about that? 2015, I mean, up till this moment, we're still talking about Safe School Initiative. I know you were a part of something related, and I think what happened then was they shared reflector jackets to students, but that's not security, essentially. So what happened from where you sit? Prof, if you could just unmute, we can't hear you. Oh dear.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Oh, fantastic. Yes. Please go ahead.
Saying the government needs to distinguish between policy, resource deployment, and post-deployment monitoring. The monitoring we are not doing effectively. Now, what has happened is that over the years, like I said at the beginning, we've been talking about this. You will be amazed at how many initiatives there are about safe schools, about revising programs. There are over 15 different committees and initiatives at the Federal Ministry of Education. But at the level of implementation, it is different. Now there's a global movement with 109 nations involved. Nigeria is fully committed, and this is the 4th meeting being hosted by Nigeria in October. and it is saying let's move from commitment to practice. My expectation is that by the time the meeting is on, we would have a major strategic program that we will present to the world for evaluation. And following that, we will have an implementation process that will change the face of education in Nigeria. You raised earlier on about technical vocational education training. Most countries in the world are looking in that direction now. But in Nigeria, we're still joking around. The UBEC built a school for vocational education in the Nigerian state in the South with 14 buildings, running over 500 million naira, handed over to the state government 4 years ago. It has not been opened for use. So the policy is good. We have policies. I agree that the national policy on education needs to be revamped, reviewed, and refocused completely. But even at the grassroots level, local governments, state governments, what are they doing in terms of refocusing the content and context of our education in Nigeria? It is still very, very weak and poor. And so there has to be a state of emergency run by persons who do not have the consciousness, the will, the commitment, the capacity, and the zeal to change things will make no difference. So there has to be a revolution within the education system to change how we think, how we do things, what we study, who we partner with, how we partner with them, and how we deploy resources, and how we follow the money to make sure that it gets to where we are going. This we are not doing at the moment. We still believe in the traditional school system. Today, people are talking of education without walls. You don't have to do 5, 10, 15, 20 years. People are talking instead of certificates, they're talking of skillficates. What skills do you have? That is what moves a nation forward. 5 years, you get a BA and then you are roaming the streets. I come from a constituency that has almost 90% graduate unemployment. There are no jobs anywhere for them. And then finally, the private sector is pretending as if it should not be properly involved in the education system. Some companies are declaring 33 billion profits. How much of that are we taxing specially for education? Because the product of our school system go to work in these companies to enable them make the profits. What are they contributing in return? So I think we need to take a special look at how we generate. I don't think resources, that is where the problem is. We can generate that resources if we have the political will. You know, we have to get the private sector in, we have to get the communities in, government has to come in, we have to truly fight corruption, we have to prioritize what we want to do and how we want to do it, and we have to bring in new technology which is now cheaper and readily accessible to make education accessible to all. I hope that all of this will come up at the Safe School Initiative Conference, the declaration which we have signed as the country, and that following that conference in October, we will see Mr. President really taking some more drastic actions. Because at the end of the day, education is the foundation of it all.
I mean, you put that rightly, Prof. Ihonvbere, but let me take this to Dr. Abubakar.
Cleared on our education sector. We have to thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Professor Julius Ihonvbere, who is the Chairman, House Committee on Basic Education and Services.